These are people that donated to the museum to help build this museum, which was built in 2004. And you had to donate $1,000 or more to get your name up there. And the little video we have narrated by Walter Cronkite, he gave back the $3,000 that we gave him to make the video. He gave it back to help build the museum.
That's not old Walter.
Yeah, he was a great man. And this should have been first, I guess, but we're going to make it last.
It's okay.
Now this is the president's ship. It started out as Eureka, and he changed the name to the Potomac. I said Eureka, that's wrong. It was Electra.
Eureka was the Electra.
Yeah, it was that, and he renamed it the Potomac. Now, he used that ship for many excuses, from going fishing to when he went out and met Winston Churchill, and they drew up the Atlantic Charter on that ship. Okay, so he loved the ship, and they still got along the story. And that's about all there is in here.
Well, we thank you for spending some time with us, and we really appreciate it. And we'll maybe see you a little bit later, but we're going to go check out the rest of the sites. All right, we just took a short little walk from the museum, and now we're at the little White House itself, and we'll give you an outside picture a little bit later. But now we're going to go inside, and with me today I have Mr. Ashley, and he's going to be our tour guide for inside the house. So we're going to walk on in. This is actually the kitchen door, not the front door. So we're going to walk in. Now, this is the kitchen door.
Yes. This is the kitchen door where people today would come through to take a tour of the little White House. And the kitchen here would have been a typical kitchen of the 1930s, but especially for this area, this would have been a dream kitchen because one of the luxury items here in the kitchen is the electric stove. Because when President Roosevelt was elected in 1932, a lot of American homes, especially in the rural areas, did not have electricity because they couldn't afford it. And through the REA, which that he created, eventually electricity was provided for homes in rural areas.
We saw in the museum all that the REA did for him, and he did for them.
And what's really unique about the kitchen here is that everything you see in the kitchen is all original. All the kitchen appliances are original. We have a pantry here that gives you all the different cooking utensils, pots and pans that they use. You have an old ice cream maker at the bottom. Ice cream was one of Roosevelt's favorite desserts. And you even have a cookbook called Southern Cooking that was used by his cook. Her name was Daisy Barner.
Okay.
And she was a local lady that came here and stayed in the servants' quarters and cooked for President Roosevelt.
Now, I noticed this when I was in here and in a lot of other places on the site, where the door, was this house built for him before he came down here, or was it he had the Warm Springs and they wanted to build a house?
Well, Roosevelt, he built the house in 1932, and Roosevelt came up to this part of the property on horseback.
Okay.
And he liked the area, and he decided to build a house here.
Okay.
And when he built the house, he was still governor of New York. And construction started in 1931 and completed in May of 32, and he was elected president in November of that same year. And Roosevelt used his own money to build his house, so this house was privately owned by FDR. And Roosevelt also had an interest in architecture. So when he was planning to build a house, he traveled throughout this area looking at various houses. And he settled on the Greek Revival style, which was common in the South. And he also drew up the floor plans and wrote down suggestions. And he had a friend by the name of Henry Toombs, who was from Atlanta, who was an architect. And Roosevelt will provide him the information, and then Henry Toombs will draw it on paper.
One more question before we move into another room is, when he, in 1932, had polio affected him yet?
Well, he actually got contracted polio in 1921.
Okay, so that
He was 39 years old.
The reason I'm asking that is I'm thinking that the doors were widened for the wheelchairs.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. The house is handicap accessible for FDR back in the 30s because it's one story and the doors are wide enough, even wide enough for wheelchairs. So that, and we have people who have their own personal motorized wheelchairs who can come in and tour the house. This room that we're in right now is the living room and dining room. So a lot of important meetings, dinners occurred in this room. Roosevelt, when he came to Warm Springs, he always would use this room, the living room, as his work area. You have here is a card table that was basically his desk that he'll be working at. And the leather chair was his favorite chair that he would sit in when he was here at the Little White House. Behind you is a telephone. Roosevelt was always in communication with Washington. So he would always have important phone calls, or he would call to the White House from here and from the Little White House in Warm Springs. Roosevelt also had a lot of hobbies, and this room really speaks of one of them, which was sailing. Roosevelt, at a very young age, learned how to sail, and the interest just started at a very young age, and throughout the years, Roosevelt started collecting sailboats, and we have a few of those sailboats here in the Little White House. The one above the fireplace, the big black and white one, is a whaling ship, and that one was actually built by FDR, by President Roosevelt, and with help of one of his bodyguards. And then the one above the sideboard in the dining room was a gift to FDR from a sea captain from Savannah named Galatini. And Roosevelt insured it about $5,000. And also you see a lot of naval ships in naval paintings. You have the USS Constitution. One of Roosevelt's favorite naval heroes is John Paul Jones, founder of the U.S. Navy. And this room also has original furnishings. And one of the interesting pieces is the dining room set. That was built in Hyde Park, New York. Eleanor Roosevelt, his wife, and two of her friends started a furniture business called Valkill Industries. And a lot of the furniture here in the house was built at that furniture factory. Like the dining table, the chairs, the sideboard, and also the beds, chest of drawers were all Valkill pieces.
All right, we're out here on the sun deck, and this is where Roosevelt held meetings and whatnot, and had different activities out on the sun deck. And what's interesting about it, Ashley just told me that it is shaped after a ship or a boat, the fantail of the boat, and that's very interesting. As he showed his love for architecture and for boats all in his house. So, is there anything else you may think of about the sun deck?
Well, what's interesting about the Little White House is that Roosevelt considered this section of the house, including the sun deck, as the front of the house. And he considered where the door is that leads outside as the back of the house.
It's pretty interesting, I guess. You never think that the back is your front, and in my house we all enter in the back and consider it the back of the house, but he is the president, so we'll let him say the front and back.
Yeah.
Alright, we just came from the sun deck, and now we're in FDR's bedroom. And actually, you can tell us a little bit about the bedroom. I know there's some important history about this, especially the bed.
Yes, the bedroom here was the bed here is the actual bed that President Roosevelt passed away on April 12, 1945 at 3:35 p.m. On that day, Roosevelt, before he passed away, was having his portrait painted in the living room, sitting at the leather chair, working at the card table. And President Roosevelt just collapsed, and they carried him to his bedroom, and this is where he laid until he passed away. His doctor was nearby, so his doctor came, and another doctor came also, trying to revive him, but he was unconscious the whole time. And President Roosevelt was 63, and he, at the time of his death, was in the early months of his 4th term as president. And he was president for 12 full years.
He's the only president to serve more than 2 terms to this day, correct?
Yes, he's the only president to serve more than 2 terms. And according to a lot of historians, he is considered about one of the top 10 of the greatest presidents that ever had. And one of the pictures above the chest of drawers is interesting. The one right above, that's kind of a white, wide frame. That's a picture of the Rose Garden at his home in Hyde Park, New York. And what's interesting is that's where he's married today. He's in Hyde Park, New York. And also, too, you have a picture of a gentleman. His name was Sam Rosamond, who was a judge at one time and was a speechwriter for FDR. And what's interesting is his picture is the only one that's in the Little White House of an actual person.
Wow, that's neat to know.
And also, too, you have several other nautical prints in here of FDR's love of the sea.
All right, we moved in from the bedroom to the bathroom now, and as you can see, it's a pretty standard bathroom with a couple of differences. Possibly the toilet paper, but Ashley can tell us more about everything in here.
Well, what's really unique about the Little White House is that all the furnishings are original in the house, including to the toilet paper in the bathroom. And this bathroom is really unique because it was handicap accessible for the president. You can see the toilet lifted above the ground, so that could be wheelchair accessible for FDR. And also, too, the tub is away from the wall, so he could grab both sides of it so he can get into the tub. And the sink also is a little bit lower, too, for his wheelchair, or his height.
Now, I know you have to keep everything clean for visitors to come in. Do y'all have a crew that comes in and cleans everything that's kind of used to historic artifacts and stuff like the bed and the dust and whatnot?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yes, we do. We have a preservation unit that comes, and if something gets torn or something gets damaged, what they'll come in and repair it.
Okay.
And then the staff here do the routine cleaning maintenance, like dusting and sweeping, and making sure that everything is clean.
Right, exactly. I just was, since it's in the bathroom, I guess that's the place to ask.
Oh, yeah. That's fine.
We have moved now from the bathroom to Miss Eleanor Roosevelt's bedroom. And Ashley, if you want to tell us again more about that.
Okay. Well, this room is, of course, Eleanor Roosevelt's bedroom, but it was also used as a guest room. And Eleanor didn't come very often to Warm Springs because, being First Lady, Eleanor was very busy with her own duties for herself as well as for FDR. Because Eleanor really helped the American people, heard about their stories, heard about their hardships, and Eleanor will go and check on projects that President Roosevelt started. So she would come to Warm Springs when she could. Now, his children, he had 5 children, and the children came quite often to the Little White House. So they would use this bedroom as well. So that's the reason why you have 2 beds in here.
We have come from Miss Roosevelt's bedroom to the foyer of the house, and actually to most people it would be the front of the house, but to President Roosevelt it's the back of the house, and this is the actual front door. And actually, we see his wheelchair and a statue of Vala, their dog. If you can tell us a little bit more about everything.
Okay, the wheelchair is an actual wheelchair that President Roosevelt used here in the house. And Roosevelt got an idea of a kitchen chair with wheels attached to it. So this was a design that Roosevelt came up with. And Roosevelt was actually, even though the wheelchair does look a little small, but for President Roosevelt it was very comfortable for him. Now what's interesting about FDR is he got polio when he was 39 years old in 1921, and he was paralyzed from the waist down. And when he became president, the American people didn't know the extent of his paralysis, because whenever he gave a public speech, he was usually walking to the stage, but he wasn't actually walking on his own. He was usually would hold on to someone's arm, using his left hand, and use a cane in his right hand, and he used his upper body to move his legs. So he had no feeling in his legs whatsoever, and he wore leg braces which kept the legs straight. And he kept on that, impression of walking throughout his whole presidency. So nobody didn't know the extent of his paralysis until after his death. So there are very few photographs of FDR taken in the wheelchair.
Yeah, we saw a few in the museum, mainly focusing on him in a wheelchair, but he was covered by a cloth or a blanket, and then we usually saw him standing. So I guess that shows a lot about him trying to appear to the American public as still stable.
Yeah, and what was interesting, the media had an agreement with Roosevelt and his advisors to keep it a secret during his presidential elections and during his presidency. And polio was a virus which could spread from one person to another. Right. So people were scared of people who had polio. And they were seen as being weak. So Roosevelt he to the American people at that time, he wanted to give the impression that he could walk. So.
All right, right now we are outside in the front of the Little White House, and what's interesting about this particular spot is where you saw in the museum that President Clinton, Carter, and Kennedy all gave speeches right here, of course at different times, but pretty interesting to stand in the same spot they did. And one more interesting fact about the White House is this light right here represents FDR's presence at the Little White House. If the light was on, then he was at home, but if it was off, he was in Washington or somewhere else. Now, as you can see, we turned it on just for today, but as you all know, he is not here. So that's the Little White House, and we'll see the rest of the grounds. We have now left the Little White House and now entered into the Flag and Stone Memorial on the FDR location. And as we'll walk up so you can see more of the flags and stones, they were given as a tribute to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Each of the 50 states and the District of Columbia are contributed a specimen of a native stone or memorial, beautiful in color, finish, and design. There are many different varieties of stone. The collection was completed in 1959. And the stones and flags are in alphabetical order going up the hill with Alaska and Alabama on the right, and we'll get a view of Alabama. Alabama's flag and stone. And the stone that Alabama selected was white marble. It's the 22nd state to enter the Union on December 14th, 1819. We dare maintain our rights is a little slogan below the emblem of the stone.
Hi, my name is Amy Robertson, and Jack and I just came from the Flag and Stone Memorial outside, and now we just entered into the Legacy Room, where we have the unfinished portrait of Franklin Roosevelt. He had a stroke right before he died, and the artist was unable to finish the painting that she was doing in watercolor, but ended up right over here is the finished portrait that she was able to complete using her memory and other photographs that she had of him. So here's the finished portrait that she was able to do, and she was very sad that she wasn't able to do the portrait of him while he was alive, but was glad to be able to capture the essence of him and his legacy.
We just came from the Legacy Room and the rest of the Little White House, and now we're in here with the gift shop with Miss Diane, and she works here and loves it, and she can tell us some things that are in here and that you can buy on your way to Little White House.
We've got some typical souvenir items, snacks for our seniors who get a little hungry belly. We've got books all about Mr. Roosevelt, mugs, cups, T-shirts, whatever kind of souvenir. We hope we'll find one that you like.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Well, thank you. And we come see Miss Diane and tell them that we sent you. All right.
Good. Thank you.
We have now come down the road from Little White House, 2 lefts, and we're at the historic pools that Roosevelt built. And with me today is Mr. David Burke. He's the interpretive ranger of this location. So tell us more about the science of the pools and how it helped polio.
Well, it is a science because polio was a disease dreaded by everybody. Every parent dreaded polio. What Roosevelt found unique was swimming in the water here helped relieving from the after effects of polio. If you look at this panel, you'll see where rainwater goes down through Pine Mountain. Through its traveling through these types of rocks, it picks up all kinds of minerals. As it goes about 3,800, 4,000 feet deep, it heats up to around 120 degrees. Below us is a fault line, the Tawaliga Fault. The water, as it's traveling down, hits the fault, can't go no further, forces itself coming back up, and it busts out here at Pine Mountain. Legend has it the Indians used it for centuries. Then as Georgians came in, they started building taverns here, and by the time of the late 1890s, big hotels were built here. It was a bustling tourist resort. And then Roosevelt heard about the warm water and a kid that had polio that recovered somewhat from it. So he came down here and felt his leg move for the first time in 3 years. That's a lot of it's due to the mineral content. You have a larger amount of magnesium. There's sulfur. There's bicarbonate. In other words, you can swim effortlessly in water that is soothing your muscles like Epsom salts. That's freshwater taste. So Roosevelt found relief in the water.
We've moved down the timeline now with Mr. Burke, and I'm asking him when it moved from a resort to a health resort, and you can shed some light on that.
Well, originally it was a resort as people came here wanting to swim in the warm waters. We have diagrams in the museum of what the original pools looked like, but by the time Roosevelt got here, there was a big T-shaped pool out there, and the first time he dipped his water into the pools, the people, the tourists, started leaving. They were afraid that polio traveled through water, and that was a big fear. And so Roosevelt wound up buying the whole property. He bought the pools. He enlarged the other pools to be what we have here. That's where you see these 3 pools here that was built for therapy. Roosevelt bought in blacksmiths. They made braces. He brought in physiotherapists, young girls from Peabody College in Tennessee. They developed the science of hydrotherapy. Braces had to be made individually. Everybody required something different. Everybody's legs were different. Everybody's arms were different. So these were all handmade braces, and they were all made with keeping with the patient in mind to make sure the patient was comfortable. You'll see different types of equipment being developed, from these beds here that were used as heating beds in the sunrooms. You'll see the iron lung down here, and really that's every parent's nightmare. If polio attacked your lungs, the iron lung was a life-saving device that could be used to help you breathe. And if you regained enough muscle strength through the use of the iron lung, you could exit the iron lung and hopefully recover.
Yeah, but it was rare.
Yeah, well, polio killed 1 in 4. I mean, it might hit your leg, it might hit your hand, it might hit your arm or both legs. In Roosevelt's case, it hit his legs. And in many cases, it hit people's lungs. But yeah, they could get out. What you didn't want to happen was for the power to go off.
Right.
And thank goodness Roosevelt created rural electrification, and so there is power in many parts of the country. If an iron lung did go out in a rural hospital, if there were no backup generators, but these had to be manually pumped 60, 70 times, or however many times a minute we breathe.
Right. Now, Mr. Burke, as we passed through the iron lung and everything else, and Roosevelt passed away, what became of his legacy? What became the end of polio? And how did it change after his death?
Well, that's a good question, because we have eradicated polio in this country today, largely in part because he founded the March of Dimes. Everybody that's my age and older remember back in grade school putting their dimes in their cards for the March of Dimes. Well, those dimes funded the vaccine research, and on April 12, 1955, we got the polio vaccine, which is a great thing. Now, polio is nearly eradicated everywhere in the world except for about 3 countries. And Rotary Club is spearheading this today, as well as the Bill Gates Foundation. But it all comes back to here at Warm Springs, Georgia, because this is where the March of Dimes got its birthplace. This is where it started. You can see what the Institute is doing today. They still use the water for swimming, for therapy. They still have it for school. They take care of babies that may have little handicaps, elderly folks with arthritis. It's still a working rehabilitation center. It has a lot of outpatient therapy and inpatient therapy. So it's still probably Roosevelt's greatest legacy.
That's amazing, and so many great things that we learned about today that he did, including the New Deal and so many power electricity, that the March of Dimes would be his greatest.
I think so too, because none of that would have happened. The New Deal wouldn't have happened had he not come here. He wouldn't have ran into politics.
Right.
The March of Dimes wouldn't have happened had he not come here. He wouldn't have had that to happen. The whole world changed because of him getting polio, but the whole world changed because he came here. And this is, like I say, this is to me probably one of the most significant spots in modern history because of what we still feel its impact today. It's not in a book, but it's there. Yeah.
We have now come from the artifact/timeline room. We're actually standing in one of the pools. There are 3 pools, and they're all connected now. And this is actually the water that used to be put in the pool. And right now it's 88 degrees, and my body temperature is 98.6 degrees. So it's going to be tough for me to tell the difference. But Mr. Burke has instructed me to feel the water, rinse my hands off a little bit, and then feel it again. I might be able to tell a change. So that's what I'm going to do. What he instructed. Yes. You definitely tell a difference. This concludes our show. We hope you've enjoyed everything. We hope you do come and visit the Little White House and the pool and everything else, and Mr. Berg and Mr. Ashley and Miss Margaret and Mr. Roy. Hope you have a great time in Warm Springs, Georgia. Thanks. I'm Jack Warren, and this is Amy Robertson reporting to you from East Alabama TV. Thank you.